Hello and welcome back to the Christian Century YouTube channel. I'm John, and I'm joined today by one of our writers, Jeannine Pitas, who has written a timely piece about political polarization, about engaging with people on the other side of the aisle. The piece is called Bridging the Ideological Divide. We are going to be diving into that piece here shortly. I will note first, we are recording this and posting this video just before a consequential presidential election here in the US. You may be watching this video just before or shortly after that election, and that might change the way you feel depending on when you watch it and what happens in terms of how you feel about politics in the US. Either way, I think it's safe to say when you're watching this, there will be a great deal of polarization and division in our country, and that these will still be very important, timely themes. Before we dive into the article itself, Jeannine, really good to see you. Can you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Jeannine Pitas. I'm a freelance writer for the Christian Century. I'm also a poet and Spanish English translator, and I teach in the English department at St. Vincent College in Western Pennsylvania. And this essay is actually part of a larger book project on the political divide in the United States that I've been working on for several years and am continuing to work on.
Great. Well, I'm very glad that part of this project has been distilled down into an article in our magazine. Um, One of the threads kind of throughout this article is about faith and the role faith might play in a moment like this. Can it even be a unifying force at one point? The question wonders, the article wonders. I wonder if you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts about faith and spiritual practices and what those have to do with this moment we're living in right now politically in the US.
So this magazine is the Christian Century, and so addressing an ecumenical Christian audience, I just want to urge everyone to really lean deeply into faith and spirituality at this time. The church is not united. It's not been united for a long time. Our different denominations have division within them around all sorts of things, politics being one. I personally know many Christians of many denominations, backgrounds who are voting in opposite ways in this election. And that's, a big part of what my project is looking at. How can faith be a unifier? I think we have to look deeply into what our faith actually teaches us. And that involves, what did Jesus teach us? What did he want us to do? What did he want us to be? How did he act in the world? What sorts of choices did he model for us to follow? And so I would urge anyone who identifies as Christian in any way to go back and actually read the Gospels. Look especially at the Sermon on the Mount. Look at Jesus' farewell address to the apostles before his passion and suffering and death and resurrection. Just go back and look at those Gospels, and you'll be surprised. It's so different. I mean, I'm assuming some of your listeners here are regular Bible readers, but me coming from the Catholic tradition, a lot of us are not, like go and look and you'll be surprised at what you see, not just listening liturgically or pulling out a passage, but it's not that much text. Take the time to read the four Gospels in order and then pray with it. I think we need to pray and lean into our spirituality, and that includes praying for people who disagree with us, people who would wish to harm us. Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. It's easy to love those who love us back, but it's harder to love those who do not, and that is what we are called to do.
Oh, thank you. Really good ideas and uh, reminder to stay grounded. And one of the ways to do that is through our spiritual practices. And yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that. So the one of the big parts of this article is introducing readers to three different kind of groups or organizations who are doing really practical work to bring people together to try to create dialogue across ideological and political divides. And I'm curious whether or not it has to do with these three groups. Just some thoughts, if you'd be willing to share some thoughts on what are some practical steps that might actually be effective, that might actually be helpful, that folks can take to kind of engage in this kind of work of, I don't know, working against the extreme polarization we have right now?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, I would say a big thing is to put our phones away and go out in and be in person with people. Know the name of the person who pours your coffee at the coffee shop that you regularly go to. Like finding in-person community, I think, is at the baseline of a lot of the healing that needs to happen. The people that I interview in the article. So the first is Mike McGillicuddy, who's a retired social worker from Chicago. And he really talks, he runs an initiative called Untying Knots, talks about leaning into the process. So talking with people and learning their stories, of what maybe avoiding polarizing issues themselves and just trying to get to know people and where they're coming from and how they have come to be who they are, to believe what they believe, what matters to them, and to understand, to tolerate that fact alignment may not always be a prerequisite. One of our problems right now is that we are having a hard time agreeing on basic truths and basic facts. And that's a huge challenge. But rather than initially judging someone else and saying, you're wrong or you don't know anything about that, Mike would urge us to question how open are any of us? Maybe try to look at the ways that we are wrong. And that kind of goes along with Thea Libresco Sargent from Braver Angels, who did a lot of work to restore debating as a common practice on college campuses. So, she would really urge us to, well, first of all, to have curiosity. So, to have curiosity about what other people think and to think about the ways that we might be wrong ourselves and to just go in with an open mind. I realize that this is very difficult. It's difficult for me. I don't like debating, period, because I don't like conversations that feel heated or emotionally adversarial. But why do they have to be? There was a big difference between any debate that we have seen where Donald Trump is on the stage and the Tim Walz and J.D. Vance debate, which actually was quite civil. So civility is possible. And Kay Scary from the People's Supper does a really good job of talking about how we can first notice our own emotional and bodily reactions to things. And if we're having a conversation that comes to feel adversarial, whether it's about politics or anything else, to really like notice our own emotions and try to stop ourselves and take a deep breath before we react. And that can be a way of lowering the temperature just in any kind of interpersonal discourse. So those are some strategies that I would recommend.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those. In addition to working at the magazine, I lead a fully online faith community. So I'm the first one to say online relationships are real and they're good.
Mhm.
But I really appreciate what you said about the importance of in-person connections as well. Like, and I think about debating. Most of the political debates I've had in the last 10 years have been on Facebook, where even if their person's picture and their name is there, it's so easy to just think I'm arguing with like an online avatar. This is not a real
Mhm.
person, so it's so easy to dehumanize the person that you're talking to. Whereas in person, um, I know that's a human being I'm having a disagreement with, and hopefully that helps pull out a little bit more of my empathy and my compassion, the fact that I'm a person talking to another person. The last thing I wanted to ask you about is it worth it? So it's so much easier. I think we kind of probably can all agree it's so much easier to stay inside of these echo chambers, these bubbles of people who think exactly like us, who agree with us. Um, it can be hard to do any of this kind of work. But for those of us who do have the privilege and the safety to be able to engage in conversations like this, Do you have anything to share on why it might be worthwhile to take the steps to engage?
Yes, I do. And I also want to thank you for mentioning privilege because I do realize that for some people, engaging with people of radically different views may actually be a threat. I mean, right now we are in a situation where people on both sides do feel threatened by policies of what will happen if the so-called other side gets into power. But for those of us who can take the step toward trying to bridge the divide, I think it is fundamentally necessary. And there are a few reasons for this. The first one I'd say really is just the stakes are very high for our own country and our integrity as a nation. We've been in a situation, I would say, since at least 2010, where every 4 years, one side is getting into power and they essentially try to undo the policies of what came before and put in new ones. And then the ball goes to the other side. And so, the other side has the ball and they do their thing. And it can become this kind of stalemate situation where it's almost like different groups of people are using the power of the state against one another rather than seeking the common good for all. So I think we need some baseline where we can talk about what the common good is and discern together what it is and try to work for it. And that's very hard when different people have different values, different concerns, different things that they're afraid of, different things that they love, different people that they love. But as to move forward in a very uncertain future where so much is changing so fast, we need to come together and agree on some baseline ideas of what is good for all. And so I think that is the first reason why this is so urgent. And that leads to the next question of the United States and its position in the world. We are dealing with many problems in the world right now. Wars, ongoing wars that seem very, very hard to end, environmental concerns on a massive scale. We just had two major hurricanes, record breaking in the United States that have left ongoing devastation. That has led to more immigrants and refugees on the move, these wars, the environmental issues. And this requires a response. We have to figure out how to deal with this. As one of the most powerful countries in the world, I see this very much as our responsibility. And unfortunately, the other powerful countries in the world are becoming increasingly autocratic, and I think it can be very easy for each of us individually to think, what can I do? And voting is the first step, but it's not everything. And I think, in order to continue the work once this election is over, no matter who wins, we really need to be willing not just to get with the people that we share values with and work for our causes, although that is important too, but we need to discern on a broader scale what can we agree on when so much is changing so fast and there's so much work to be done.
Mm, thanks, Jeannine. Anyone out there who's interested in learning more and maybe even getting involved in some of this work that's being done, there will be plenty of links below in the video description. Check it out to read Jeannine's article in the Christian Century. Also, we'll have the websites to some of the organizations mentioned here in this chat and in the article, Braver Angels, the People's Supper. Um, Thanks so much for this article and for this chat, Jeannine. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time.